New images from a recent underwater expedition to the wreck of the Titanic.
But there's one version of Titanic we have never seen until this morning.
For over a century, we thought we knew the story.
The Titanic story that everybody knows is largely myth.
Titanic hits an iceberg. The ship sinks. End of tragedy.
God almighty.
But newly uncovered evidence, from undeveloped photos, mystery signals, to a diary no one was supposed to see, now suggests we were lied to.
A notebook was found 780 feet from the stern. It belonged to a 17-year-old passenger.
What if the real story was buried with the wreck?
One of the dudes that survived the Titanic, he was in the water for 2 hours.
What if someone survived and was never meant to be found?
By the grace of God, I came across a lifeboat and they pulled me in.
They found a lock. This is the most precious item in my life.
The story we thought was settled. For more than a century, the Titanic disaster has been treated like a closed case. The ship hit an iceberg. The hull split. Panic followed. Lifeboats left half empty. Heroism and cowardice were neatly assigned. Official inquiries in 1912 told us what happened, who failed, and who deserved blame. And for decades, that version hardened into something close to myth. But here's the uncomfortable truth most documentaries rush past. Almost everything we know comes from survivor testimony collected under extreme shock, guilt, and public pressure. People were questioned days after watching friends die in freezing water. Others testified months later after newspapers had already shaped the narrative. Some altered their stories to protect reputations. Others stayed silent forever. And the physical evidence? The wreck lay more than 12,000 feet below the surface, unreachable, unseen, and completely silent. Even early investigators admitted inconsistencies. Officers contradicted each other. Timelines didn't line up. One witness swore lifeboats were loaded calmly. Another described chaos at the exact same moment. The infamous women and children first rule was reported differently depending on which side of the ship you were on. So which version was true? Here's a fun but unsettling fact. The British and American inquiries never agreed on how long the ship stayed afloat after the collision. Not by minutes, by nearly half an hour. That alone changes everything about evacuation decisions. Another overlooked detail? Several passengers claimed to see a long, dark shape on the horizon before the impact. Others denied any warning at all. Ice warnings were sent, some were ignored. Some may never have reached the bridge. According to later historians, at least 6 wireless messages vanished from official records. And then there's the theory that refuses to die. That the damage was not a single clean gash, but a series of smaller ruptures worsened by brittle steel. Metallurgical studies decades later showed Titanic's rivets contained unusually high slag content. Was the ship doomed the moment she scraped the iceberg? Or was the disaster compounded by design flaws no one wanted to admit? The strange signature of Benjamin Guggenheim's camera. For weeks after the discovery, the recovery team didn't even realize what they had. A sealed, leather-bound camera case retrieved from the wreck was logged, photographed, and sent off for imaging. It wasn't until a restoration specialist noticed the faint, curling initials pressed into the aged leather that everything changed. BG. 2 letters. Easy to overlook. But cross-referenced with the Titanic's manifest, only one name matched both the initials and the location where the object was found. Benjamin Guggenheim, the American mining tycoon, famously dressed in evening wear as the ship went down, calmly helping women into lifeboats before declaring he was prepared to go down like a gentleman. So how did his personal camera, a Kodak Brownie of all things, survive a fall into the cold, high-pressure, bacteria-laced seabed? The answer might lie in what surrounded it. When ROV-3 captured the first high-resolution scans of the object, specialists noticed something odd. The camera was nested inside a collapsed portion of wall near what used to be the first-class promenade deck, but partially buried in a thick layer of micro-silt, almost like it had been tucked away. Experts theorized that during the final structural breakup, the camera may have been caught in a sort of pocket, a vacuum-sealed crevice that shielded it from corrosive salt water and oxygen exposure. A tiny underwater time capsule. But it gets even stranger. Chemical analysis of the leather casing revealed traces of tannic acid and silver nitrate, likely from treatment Guggenheim had personally commissioned for aesthetic purposes. These same compounds, under deep-sea conditions, created a bio-resistant shell that inhibited microbial decay, meaning the casing may have played an accidental role in preserving not just the camera, but the images inside. And when they scanned the internal film roll, the development team found 10 full exposures, not blank frames, not chemical noise, actual shadow-preserved negatives, and one frame, just one, showed what appeared to be a blurred, towering structure on the horizon, seconds before the collision. The vanishing lifeboat that rewrites everything. Among the strangest and least explained anomalies in the Titanic disaster is something that's rarely talked about outside specialist circles: the mystery of Lifeboat A. When RMS Carpathia arrived to rescue survivors in the freezing dawn light, its crew counted and logged every lifeboat they recovered. All but one had survivors aboard. All but one had some official documentation, except Lifeboat A. It was found adrift, partially flooded, with 3 frozen bodies and no signs of how it got there. No oars, no light, and no known launch record from the night before. Just drifting, as if it had been cut loose or abandoned. The standard explanation? Chaos. Lifeboat A was likely launched late, got swamped at the davits, and some survivors tried to cling to it in the water. But there's a problem. No single eyewitness report matches what rescuers found. No one claimed to have been there when Lifeboat A was launched, and no crew member was officially assigned to it. And here's where things get even weirder. Among the 3 corpses recovered was a man wearing a steward's jacket, but the garment had no identifying tag or number, something that was standard White Star protocol. When a Titanic steward was on duty, their coat bore a sewn-in ID marker. This one was blank. Even more puzzling? One of the bodies was photographed before burial at sea, and years later, digital image enhancement suggested something eerie: a blurred object still clutched in the man's left hand. Analysts who studied the photo believe it could have been a small hand-crank camera, consistent with passenger use in that era. But the object was never logged. It vanished before anyone could examine it further. Some believe that Lifeboat A may have left the ship before the official evacuation began, launched prematurely, and quietly disappeared into the dark, either by order or mistake. Others whisper of a cover-up, that someone high-ranking fled early, that this boat held secrets no one wanted exposed. But here's what matters most. No recovered photo ever showed Lifeboat A. Until now. The fire that was burning before the iceberg ever hit. It sounds impossible at first. A fire on the Titanic before it struck the iceberg? And yet evidence has been hiding in plain sight for years, buried in photographs, overlooked in crew testimony, and now reignited by the newly recovered camera images. Here's the core of the theory. Titanic set sail from Southampton already on fire, deep within one of her coal bunkers. Not a raging blaze, but a smoldering fire that had reportedly been burning for days. Several crew members testified to this during the original inquiries, but their accounts were quickly downplayed. It was labeled common on coal-powered ships. Nothing to worry about, just bad luck. But recent high-resolution scans of the starboard hull, including from expeditions in 2010 and 2017, revealed a long vertical black streak directly beneath where the iceberg made contact. Metallurgists and fire investigators now believe this mark is consistent with a localized coal fire, burning hot enough to weaken the steel bulkhead behind it. So what does that mean? It means the ship may have been structurally compromised before the collision, that the very section where the iceberg struck, compartment 6, may have fractured more easily due to heat-damaged metal. This isn't just speculation. A 2017 documentary by journalist Senan Maloney argued that the fire could have weakened the hull by up to 70% in that area. The footage was reviewed by multiple materials experts, and it changed how many saw the disaster. Now here's where it connects to the Guggenheim camera. According to a leaked report from the restoration team, one of the recovered images appears to show a faint darkened area on the starboard side hull, visible from the deck near dusk on April 14th. If verified, this would be the first onboard photo ever taken that hints at external fire damage before the iceberg impact. It suggests some passengers may have seen it and never realized what they were looking at.
And 1,500 people, their lives would have been saved. And then a boat could have gotten there and rescued people.
The life jacket found 200 miles away, and the handwriting no one can explain. In the summer of 1968, over 5 decades after Titanic vanished beneath the Atlantic, a strange discovery washed ashore near the southern coast of Newfoundland. A lobster fisherman found what looked like a heavily deteriorated canvas life jacket, tangled in kelp and partially embedded in sand. At first glance, it was assumed to be from a more recent wreck, but when it was passed to local authorities and later examined by maritime historians, the reaction was disbelief. The design matched only one known model, the kapok-filled White Star Line issue, manufactured in 1912. Now, how could that be possible? Titanic's sinking site lies roughly 200 miles southeast of where the life jacket was found. Even factoring in current drift and storms, no one expected any debris to survive or travel that far, let alone remain in any condition to be identified half a century later. But what made the object truly unsettling wasn't just the life jacket itself. It was what was written on it.
Due to which the entire weight of the stern section was falling on the pivot point, that is the center.
Faint but still visible beneath layers of salt stains and mildew were handwritten initials in blue-black ink, AFC. The problem? No crew member or passenger with those initials appears on the official Titanic manifest. Researchers double-checked archived boarding documents, crew rosters, even stowaway reports. Nothing. No AFC anywhere, so who wrote it? Some believe it may have belonged to an unregistered ship worker, perhaps a last-minute coal trimmer or replacement deckhand who never made it into official records. Others suggest a black market passenger, someone smuggled aboard under a false name, a not unheard-of practice on transatlantic voyages during that era. But here's where it gets even stranger. Recent analysis of the ink and canvas revealed traces of chemical preservatives not used until the 1920s. That shouldn't be possible, unless the life jacket was tampered with after the wreck. Was it recovered decades ago and hidden? Was it planted as part of a hoax? Or did someone survive Titanic and vanish into history? The object now sits locked in a private collection, off-limits to most researchers. The Morse signal that shouldn't exist. Just when it seems the Titanic mystery has stretched as far as it can go, another detail quietly resurfaces, one that radio historians still argue about in hushed tones. A signal, sent after the ship was supposed to be silent. In the early hours of April 15, 1912, multiple wireless operators aboard nearby vessels logged something unsettling. A weak, broken Morse transmission. Not a full distress call, not the familiar CQD or SOS, just fragments. Pulses, stops and starts, almost like someone was struggling to keep power alive.
And it was often the primary means of communication in remote or high-risk areas.
Officially, Titanic's wireless went dead shortly after 2:17 a.m. when the ship slipped beneath the surface. That's what the inquiries concluded. Case closed. Except one ship, the SS Mount Temple, recorded faint Morse clicks nearly 40 minutes later, too late to be Titanic, too weak to be Carpathia, and coming from a direction that made no sense. At the time, the report was brushed aside. Static, atmospheric interference. The North Atlantic was notorious for it, but modern analysis paints a more troubling picture. The signal pattern didn't match random noise. It showed intentional spacing, human rhythm, someone tapping, slowly. Here's the detail that keeps experts awake. The signal wasn't SOS. It matched an older, informal distress shorthand used by some Marconi operators, a practice never officially documented, but passed between wireless men, almost like a last-ditch attempt to say, "We're still here." Now connect this to what we've already uncovered. if command continued later than reported, if certain areas of the ship remained accessible longer, if power didn't fail all at once, then it's possible, just possible, that someone remained alive inside an air pocket near the wireless room, or using emergency battery power. The Titanic was enormous. Its interior became a maze of sealed compartments once it flooded unevenly. And here's the chilling part. One of the recovered Guggenheim photographs, according to internal notes, shows the wireless mast still upright well after midnight. Lights faint but visible. That detail alone contradicts the timeline accepted for decades. If the mast was still functional, the radio might have been too. Some theorists go further. They suggest the signal wasn't meant for rescue ships at all, that it was directed toward Cape Race, the Marconi station in Newfoundland. A final attempt to log something. An observation, a warning, or evidence someone wanted preserved. The stoker who was declared dead then signed a document in 1932. In 1912, over 1,500 people were declared dead after the Titanic disaster. Among them was a man named Thomas R. Merton, a 31-year-old coal stoker who worked deep within the ship's boiler rooms, the harshest, hottest place on the vessel. He was registered aboard under crew number 259 and was last seen helping to manually pump seawater to delay the flooding. No body was ever recovered. No personal effects found. He was officially listed as presumed drowned. But 20 years later, in January of 1932, something deeply strange occurred. A property deed was filed in Halifax, Nova Scotia, under the name Thomas R. Merton, bearing a near-identical signature to his 1912 crew contract.
I did not.
Do you think that if you had had glasses, you could have seen the iceberg sooner?
Certainly.
How much sooner do you think you could have seen it?
Handwriting analysts in the 1980s, using enhanced scans, found an 87% match rate with Titanic-era documents. The signature wasn't just similar, it was consistent, down to the pressure points on the capital T and the curved tail on the R. At the time, this was dismissed as coincidence, a clerical error, a different man. But no second Thomas R. Merton could ever be found in Halifax directories before or after 1932. And here's where it gets colder. In the late 2000s, a Titanic archivist rediscovered a sealed White Star Line box in a private estate auction in Cornwall. Inside were letters, some typed, some handwritten, including one carbon-copied sheet dated August 1933. It was unsigned but clearly addressed to a former White Star legal rep in London. The letter referenced the man who walked off the North Atlantic, the one we agreed not to log. It ended with the line, "If you still have the logbook, destroy page 17. Immediately, no logbook has ever been recovered, and no records of lifeboat launches or rescues make mention of a stoker surviving without documentation. The diary that wasn't supposed to survive. In the early 1900s, Edith Corse Evans was one of the most talked-about names among Titanic's first-class passengers. A wealthy New Yorker with ties to prominent banking families, she was known for her wit, sharp memory, and, more crucially, her habit of writing nightly diary entries during voyages. Survivors confirmed she kept a slim, leather-bound journal during the trip. Evans famously gave up her seat in Lifeboat 4 to another woman, reportedly saying, "You have children, I have none." She died in the sinking. Her body was never recovered, and for over a century her diary was presumed lost to the depths. Until it wasn't. In 2014, a private estate sale in Glasgow unearthed an unmarked storage box tucked away in the attic of a deceased maritime collector. Inside were several water-damaged items, postcards, a White Star Line menu, and a crumbling book, later confirmed by handwriting experts to be Evans's diary, complete with entries dated April 10th through April 14th, 1912. But here's where things get unsettling. The final entry, written just hours before the collision, makes no mention of icebergs. Instead, it refers to a long, low shape on the horizon and the odd behavior of some officers after receiving an urgent cable. She wrote of overhearing a conversation in hushed tones near the Marconi room, a voice saying, "We're not alone out here tonight." Even stranger, there's an ink-smudged note added in the margin, in different handwriting. A rushed scrawl, 4 chilling words. Don't let them know. Who added it? No one knows. The handwriting doesn't match Evans. Some speculate it may have been one of the crew members who sorted through passenger belongings in the days after the disaster. But here's the real kicker. The diary was never officially logged among recovered artifacts. It bypassed every known catalog of Titanic memorabilia, which means someone intentionally kept it hidden. Hit subscribe and click the card on screen now.